Swell. That's just where you belong, with those phonies. You should have left that mutt of yours 20 years ago for her good as well as your own. But you didn't, and now you can stew in it. Stew in it, but leave my Annie alone. It's creepy, Harry. When I think of you thinking she's your daughter, it's like rubbing her all over with shit. He sighs through his nose. You still have a sweet tongue, he says. She is embarrassed. Her iron hair has gone straggly, and she presses it flat with the heels of her hands, as if trying to crush something inside her skull. I shouldn't say something like that, but it's frightening, having you show up in your fancy clothes wanting to claim my daughter. You make me think if I hadn't had the abortion, if I hadn't let my parents have their way, it might have all worked out differently, and we could have a daughter now, but you... I know, you did the right thing. He feels her fighting the impulse to touch him, to cling to him, to let herself be crushed into his clumsy arms at once. He looks for a last topic. Awkwardly, he asks, "What are you going to do when Morris grows up and leaves home?" He remembers his hat and picks it up, pinching the soft new crown in 3 fingers. "I don't know. Hang on a little more. Whatever happens, land won't go down. Every year I lasted out here is money in the bank." He sighs through his nose again. "Okay, Ruth, if that's how it is, I'll run then." "Really? No soap on the girl?" "Of course not. Think it through. Suppose she was yours. At this stage it'd just confuse her." He blinks. "Is this an admission?" He says, "I never was too good at thinking things through." Ruth smiles at the floor. The squarish dent above her cheekbone, seen this way from above, was one of the first things he noticed about her. Chunky and tough, but kindly somehow. Another human heart telling him he was a big bunny, out by the parking meters in the neon light the first time they met. Trains still ran through the center of Brewer then. "Men don't have to be," she says. The dog became agitated when they both stood, and Ruth's voice became louder and angry. And now Fritzie leads them from the room and waits, tail inquisitively wagging, with her nose at the crack of the door leading outside. Ruth opens it, and the storm door wide enough for the dog to pass through, but not Harry. "Want a cup of coffee?" she asks. He told Janice 1 o'clock at Schechner's. "Oh, Jesus, thanks, but I ought to get back to work." "You came here just about Annabelle? You don't want to hear about me?" "I have heard about you, haven't I? Whether I have a boyfriend or not? Whether I ever thought about you? Yeah, well, I'm sure that'd be interesting. From the sound of it, you've done terrifically. Frank and Morris and... who's the other one?" "Scott." "Right. And you have all this land. Sorry, to have left you in such a mess way back then." "Well," Ruth says, with a considering slowness in which he imagines he can hear her late husband speaking, "I guess we make our own messes." She seems now not merely fat and gray, but baffled. Straw on her sweater, hair on her cheeks. A shaggy monster, lonely. He longs to be out that double door into the winter air where nothing is growing. Once he escaped by telling her, "I'll be right back," but now there is not even that to say. Both know what people should never know, that they will not meet again. He notices on the hand of hers that grips the doorknob a thin gold ring, all but lost in the flesh of one finger. His heart races, trapped. She has mercy on him. "Take care, Rabbit," she says. "I was just kidding about the outfit. You look good." Harry ducks his head as if to kiss her cheek, but she says, "No." By the time he has taken a step off the concrete porch, her shadow has vanished from the double door's black glass. The gray of the day has intensified, releasing a few dry flakes of snow that will not amount to anything, that float sideways like flecks of ash. Fritzie trots beside him to the glossy grape-blue Celica, and has to be discouraged from jumping into the back seat. Once on his way, out the driveway and past the mailboxes that say Blankenbiller and Muth, Harry pops a lifesaver into his mouth and wonders if he should have called her bluff on the birth certificates. Or suppose Frank had had another wife, and Scott was his child by that marriage. If the girl was as young as Ruth said, wouldn't she still be in high school? But no. Let go. God has never wanted him to have a daughter. Waiting in the overheated front room of Shakner's, surrounded by plush new furniture, Janice looks petite and prosperous, and with her Caribbean tan younger than 44. When he kisses her on the lips, she says, Clove, what are you hiding?" "Onions for lunch." She dips her nose close to his lapel. "You smell of smoke." Manny gave me a cigar." She hardly listens to his lies. She is breathy and electric with news of her own. "Harry, Melanie called Mother from Ohio. Nelson is with her. Everything's all right." As Janice continues, he can see her mouth move, her bangs tremble, her eyes widen and narrow, and her fingers tug in excitement at the pearl strand the lapels of her coat disclose. But Rabbit is distracted from the exact sense of what she is saying by remembering, when he bent his face close to old Ruth's in the light of the door, a glitter there, on the tired skin beneath her eyes, and by the idiotic thought, which it seems he should bottle and sell, that our tears are always young. The salt water stays the same from cradle, as she said, to grave. The little stone house that Harry and Janice bought for $78,000 with $15,600 down sits on a quarter-acre of bushy land, tucked in off a macadamized dead-end, behind two larger examples of what is locally known as Penn Park pretentious. A tall mock Tudor, with gables like spires and red-tiled roofs, and clinker bricks sticking out at crazy melted angles, and a sort of neo-plantation manse of serene, thin bricks, the pale yellow of lemonade, with a glassed-in sun-porch, and on the other side a row of Palladian windows, where Harry guesses the dining-room is. He has been out surveying his property, looking for a sunny patch where a garden might be dug in this spring. The spot behind Ma Springer's house on Joseph Street had been too shady. He finds a corner that might do, with some cutting back of oak limbs that belong to his neighbor. The earth generally in this overgrown, mature suburb is well shaded. His lawn is half moss, which this mild winter has dried, but left exposed and resilient still. He also finds a little cement fish pond with a blue-painted bottom, dry and drifted with pine needles. Someone had once sunk seashells in the wet cement of the slanting rim. The things you buy when you buy a house: doorknobs, window-sills, radiators, all his. If he were a fish, he could swim in this pond come spring. He tries to picture that moment when whoever it was, man, woman, or child, or all three, had set these shells here, in the summer shade of trees a little less tall than these above him now. The weak winter light falls everywhere in his yard, webbed by the shadows from leafless twigs. He senses, standing here, a silt of caring that has fallen from purchaser to purchaser. The house was built in that depressed but scrupulous decade when Harry was born. Suave gray limestone had been hauled from the quarries in the far north of Diamond County and dressed and fitted by men who took the time to do it right. At a later date after the war, some owner broke through the wall facing away from the curb and built an addition of clapboards and white-blotched brick. Paint is peeling from the clapboards beneath the Anderson windows of what is now Janice's kitchen. Harry makes a mental note to trim back the branches that brush against the house, to cut down the dampness. Indeed, there are several trees here that might be turned altogether into firewood, but until they leaf out in the spring he can't be sure which should go. The house has two fireplaces, one in the big, long living room, and the other, off the same flue, in the little room behind that Harry thinks of as a den. His den. He and Janice moved in yesterday, a Saturday. Prue was coming home from the hospital with the baby, and if they were not there, she could take the bedroom with its own bathroom away from the street. Also, they thought the confusion might mask for Janice's mother the pain of their escape. Webb Murcutt and the others got back from the Caribbean Thursday night, as planned, and Saturday morning Webb brought one of his roofer's trucks with extension ladders roped to both sides and helped them move. Ronnie Harrison, that Fink, said he had to go into the office to tackle the backlog of paperwork that had built up during his vacation. He had worked Friday night to 10 o'clock. But Buddy Inglefinger came over with Webb, and it didn't take the three men more than 2 hours to move the Angstroms. There wasn't much furniture they could call their own, mostly clothes, and Janice's mahogany bureau, and some cardboard boxes of kitchen equipment that had been salvaged when the previous house they could call their own had burned down in 1969. All of Nelson's stuff they left. One of the butch women came out onto her porch and waved goodbye. So news travels in a neighborhood even when the people aren't friendly. Harry had always meant to ask them what it was like and why. He can see not liking men. He doesn't like them much himself. But why would you like women any better if you were one, especially women who hammer all the time just like men? From Schechner's on Thursday afternoon, he and Janice had bought, and got them to deliver on Friday, a new color Sony TV. Rabbit hates to put any more money into Japanese pockets, but he knows from Consumer Reports that in this particular line they can't be touched for quality. And a pair of big padded silvery pink wing chairs. He has always wanted a wing chair. He hates drafts on his neck. People have died from drafts on their necks. And a queen-size mattress and box springs on a metal frame without headboard. This bed he and Webb and Buddy carry upstairs to the room at the back, with a partially slanted ceiling, but space for a mirror if they want it on the blank wall next to the closet door. And the chairs and TV go not into the living room, which is too big to think about furnishing at first, but into the much cozier room just off it, the den. Always he has wanted a den, a room where people would have trouble getting at him. What he especially loves about this little room, besides the fireplace and the built-in shelves where you could keep either books or Ma's knickknacks and china when she dies, with liquor in the cabinets below, and even room for a little refrigerator when they get around to it, are the wall-to-wall carpeting of a kind of green and orange mix that reminds him of cheerleaders' tassels, and the little high windows whose sashes crank open and shut, and are composed of leaded lozenge panes such as you see in books of fairy tales. He thinks in this room he might begin to read books instead of just magazines and newspapers, and begin to learn about history, say. You have to step down into the den, one step down from the hardwood floor of the living room, and this small difference in plane hints to him of many reforms and consolidations now possible in his life, like new shoots on a tree cropped back. Franklin Drive is the elegant street their dead-end spur cuts off of. 14.5 Franklin Drive is their postal address, and the spur itself has no street name. They should call it Angstrom Way. Webb suggested Angstrom Alley, but Harry has had enough of alleys in his Mount Judge years, and resents Webb's saying this. First he tells you to sell gold too soon, then he fucks your wife, and now he puts your house down. Harry has never lived at so low a number as 14.5 before. He grew up with Pop and Mom and Mim at 303 Jackson Road. The Bolgers had 301, the corner house with the light. The apartment on Wilbur Street, he can barely remember, was a high number way up the hill, 447, apartment number 5 on the 3rd floor. The ranch house in Penn Villas was 26 Vista Crescent. Ma Springer's was 89 Joseph. Though 14.5 is a good stiff chip in from Franklin Drive, the mailman in his little red, white, and blue Jeep knows where they are. Already they've received mail here. Flyers to Resident collected while they were in the Caribbean, and Saturday around 1:30, after Webb and Buddy were gone, while Janice and Harry were arranging spoons and pans they'd forgotten they owned in the kitchen, the letter slot clacked, and a postcard and a white envelope lay on the front hall's bare floor. The envelope, one of the long, plain stamped ones you buy at the post office, had no return address and was postmarked Brewer. It was addressed to just Mr. Harry Angstrom in the same slanting block printing that had sent him last April the clipping about Skeeter. Inside this new envelope the clipping was very small, and the same precise hand that had addressed it had inscribed in ballpoint along the top edge, "From Golf Magazine Annual Roundup." The item read, "A costly birdie. Dr. Sherman Thomas cooked his own goose when he killed one of the Canadian variety at Congressional CC. The court levied a $500 fine for the act." Janice forced a laugh, reading at his side, there in the echoing bare hallway that led through a white arch into the long living room. He looked over at her guiltily and agreed with her unspoken thought. Thelma. Her color had risen. A minute before, they had been in sentimental raptures over an old mixmaster that, plugged in again after 10 years in Ma Springer's attic, had whirred. Now she blurted, "She'll never let us alone, never." Thelma? Of course she will. That was the deal. She was very definite about it. Weren't you with Webb? Oh, of course, but words don't mean anything to a woman in love. Who, you with Webb? No, you goon, Thelma, with you. She told me she loves Ronnie, though I don't see how she can. He's her bread and butter. You're her dream man. You really turn her on. You sound amazed, he said accusingly. Oh, you don't not turn me on. I can see what she sees. It's just... She turned away to hide her tears. Everywhere he looked, women were crying. The intrusion! To know that that was her that sent that other thing way back then. To think of her watching us all the time, waiting to pounce. They're evil people, Harry. I don't want to see any of them any more. Oh, come on. He had to hug her there in the hollow hall. He likes it now when she gets all flustered and frowny, her breath hot and somehow narrow with grief. She seems most his then, the keystone of his wealth. Once when she got like this, her fear contaminated him and he ran. But in these middle years it is so clear to him that he will never run that he can laugh at her, his stubborn prize. They're just like us. That was a holiday. In real life, they're very square. Janice was vehement. I'm furious with her doing such a flirtatious thing so soon after. They'll never let us alone, never, now that we have a house. As long as we were at Mother's, we were protected. And it was true. The Harrisons and the Merkits and Buddy Inglefinger and the tall new girlfriend with her frizzy hair, now up in cornrows, and juju beads, did come over last night, the Angstroms' first night in their new house, bearing bottles of champagne and brandy, and stayed until 2, so Sunday feels sour and guilty. Harry has no habits yet in this house. Without habits and Ma's old furniture to cushion him, his life stretches emptily on all sides, and it seems that moving in any direction he's bound to take a fall. The other piece of mail that came Saturday, the postcard, was from Nelson. Hi, Mom and Dad. Spring semester begins the 28th, so I'm in good shape. Need certified check for $1,087, $397 instructional fee, $90 general fee, $600 surcharge for non-Ohio students, plus living expenses. $2,000 to $2,500 should be enough. We'll call when you have phone. Melanie says hi. Love, Nelson. On the other side of the card was a modern brick building topped by big slatted things like hot air vents, identified as Business Administration Building, Kent State University. Harry asked, "What about Prue? The kid's a father and doesn't seem to know it." He knows it. He just can't do everything at once. He's told Prue over the phone he'll drive back as soon as he's registered and look at the baby and leave us the car he took. Though maybe, Harry, we could just let him use it for now. That's my Corona. He's doing what you wanted him to do, go back to college. Prue understands. She understands she's linked up with a hopeless loser, Harry said, but his heart wasn't in it. The kid was no threat to him for now. Harry was king of the castle. And today is Super Sunday. Janice tries to get him up for church. She is driving Mother. But he is far too hungover and wants to return to the warm pocket of a dream he had been having, a dream involving a girl, a young woman he has never met before, with darkish hair. They have met somehow at a party, and are in a little bathroom together, not speaking, but with a rapport, as if just having had sex, or about to have sex, between them, sex very certain and casual between them, but not exactly happening. The floor of many small square tiles at an angle beneath them, the small space of the bathroom cupped around them like the little chrome bowl around the flame of the perpetual cigar lighter at the old tobacco store downtown, the bliss of a new relationship. He wants it to go on, but is awake and can't get back. This bedroom, its bright slanted ceiling, is strange. They must get curtains soon. Is Janice up to this? For much, she's never had to do much. He makes what breakfast he can of a single orange in the nearly empty refrigerator, plus some salted nuts left over from the party last night, plus a cup of instant coffee, dissolved with hot water straight from the tap. This house, too, like Webb's, has those single-lever faucets shaped like a slender prick stung on the tip by a bee. The refrigerator went with the place, and one of the things that sold him has an automatic ice maker that turns out crescent-shaped cubes by the bushel. Even though the old mixmaster works, he hasn't forgotten his promise to Janice to buy her a Cuisinart. Maybe the trouble she has getting meals on the table related to its being Ma Springer's old-fashioned kitchen. He roams through his house, warily exulting in the cast-iron radiators, the brass window catches, the classy little octagonal bathroom tiles, and the doors with key-lock knobs. These details of what he has bought shine out in the absence of furniture, and will soon sink from view as the days here clutter them over. Now they are naked and pristine. Upstairs, in a slanting closet off of what once must have been a boy's bedroom, its walls pricked with dozens of thumbtack holes and marred with ends of Scotch tape used to hold posters, he finds stacks of Playboys and penthouses from the early 70s. He fetches from out beside the kitchen steps, under the slowly revolving electric meter, one of the big green plastic trash barrels he and Janice bought yesterday at sure value. But before disposing of each magazine, Rabbit leafs through it, searching out the center spreads month after month, year after year. As the airbrushing recedes, and the pubic hair first peaks and then froths boldly forth, and these young women, perfect as automobile bodies, let their negligées fall open frontally, and revolve upon their couches of leopard skin, so subscribers' eyes at last can feast upon their full shame and treasure. An invisible force, month after month, through each year's seasons, forces gently wider open their flawless thighs, until somewhere around the bicentennial issues the constitutional triumph of open beaver is attained, and the girls from Texas and Hawaii and South Dakota yield up to the lights and lens a vertical red aperture that seems to stare back, apart from the eye's gaze, out of a blood-flushed nether world, scarcely pretty, an ultimate which yet acts as a barrier to some secret beyond, within, still undisclosed as the winter light alters at the silent window. Outside, a squirrel is watching him, its gray back arched, its black eye alert. Nature, Harry sees, is everywhere. This tree that comes so close to the house he thinks is a cherry, its bark in rings. The squirrel, itself spied, scurries on. The full load of magazines makes the trash barrel almost too heavy to lift. He lugs it downstairs. Janice comes back after 2, having had lunch with her mother and Prue and the baby. Everybody seemed cheerful, she reports, including Baby. Baby have a name yet? Prue asked Nelson about Rebecca, and he said absolutely not. Now she's thinking of Judith. That's her mother's name. I told them to forget Janice. I never much liked it for myself. I thought she hated her mother. She doesn't hate her. She doesn't much respect her. It's her father she hates. But he's been on the phone to her a couple of times and been very, conciliatory. Oh, great. Maybe he can come and help run the lot. He can do our steam fitting. How does Prue feel about Nelson's running off just on the eve? Janice takes off her hat, a fuzzy violet loose-knit beret she wears in winter, and that makes her look, with the sheepskin coat, like some brown-faced boy of a little soldier off to the wars. Her hair stands up with static electricity. In the empty living room, she has nowhere to drop her hat and throws it onto a white windowsill. Well, she says, she's interesting about it. For just now, she says, she's just as glad he isn't around. It would be one more thing to cope with. In general, she feels it's something he had to do to get his shit together. That's her expression. I think she knows she pushed him. Once he gets his degree, she thinks, he'll be much more comfortable with himself. She doesn't seem at all worried about losing him for good or anything. Huh. What do you have to do to get blamed for something these days? They're very tolerant of each other, Janice says, and I think that's nice. She heads upstairs, and Harry follows her up, closely, afraid of losing her in the vast newness of their house. He asks, "She gonna go out there and live with him in an apartment or what?" She thinks her going out there with the baby would panic him right now. And, of course, for Mother, it'd be much nicer if she stayed. Isn't Prue at all miffed about Melanie? No, she says Melanie will watch after him for her. They don't have this jealousy thing the way we do, if you can believe them. If. Speaking of which, Janice drops her coat on the bed and bends over, ass high, to unzip her boots. Thelma had left a message with Mother about whether or not you and I wanted to come over to their house for a light supper and watch the Super Bowl. I guess the Merkits will be there. And you said? I said no. Don't worry, I was quite sweet. I said we were having Mother and Prue over here to watch the game on our brand-new Sony. It's true, I invited them. In stocking feet, she stands and puts her hands on the hips of her black church suit, as if daring him to admit he would rather go out and be with that crummy crowd than stay home with his family. Fine, he says. I haven't really seen. Oh, and quite a sad thing. Mother got it from Grace Stool, who's good friends apparently with Peggy Fosnot's aunt. While we were down there, Peggy went into her doctor's for a checkup, and by night time he had her in the hospital and a breast taken off. My God. Breast he had sucked. Poor old Peggy. Flicked away by God's fingernail with its big moon. Life is too big for us in the end. They of course said they got it all, but then they always say that. She seemed lately headed for something unfortunate. She's been grotesque. I should call her, but not today. Janice is changing into dungarees to do house cleaning. She says the people have left the place filthy, but he can't see it, except for the playboys. She has never been much of a neatness freak wherever they have lived before. Uncurtained winter light bouncing off the bare floors and blank walls turns her underwear to silver, and gives her shoulders and arms a quick life as of darting fish, before they disappear into an old shirt of his and a moth-eaten sweater. Behind her, their new bed, unmade, hasn't been fucked on yet. They were too drunk and exhausted last night. In fact, they haven't since that night on the island. He asks her irritably, what about his lunch? Janice asks, "Oh, didn't you find something in the fridge?" "There was one orange. I ate it for breakfast." "I know I bought eggs and sliced ham, but I guess Buddy and what's-her-name?" "Valerie." "Wasn't her hair wild? Do you think she takes drugs?"
Ate it all up in that omelette they made after midnight. Isn't that a sign of drugs and abnormal appetite for food? I know there's some cheese left, Harry. Couldn't you make do with cheese and crackers until I go out and buy something for Mother later? I don't know what's open Sundays around here. I can't keep running back to the Mount Judge Superette and using up gas." "No," he agrees, and makes do with cheese and crackers and a Schlitz that is left over from the 3 six-packs Ronnie and Thelma brought over. Webb and Cindy brought the brandy and champagne. All afternoon he helps Janice clean, Windexing windows and wiping woodwork, while she mops floors and even scours the kitchen and bathroom sinks. They have a downstairs bathroom here, but he doesn't know where to buy toilet paper printed with comic strips. Janice has brought her mother's waxing machine in the Maverick along with some butcher's paste, and he wipes the wax on the long blonde living-room floor. Each whorl of wood grain and slightly popped-up nail and old scuff of a rubber heel his house. As he lays the wax on with circular swipes, Rabbit keeps chasing the same few thoughts in his brain, stupid as brains are when you do physical work. Last night he kept wondering if the other two couples had gone ahead and swapped, Ronnie and Cindy doing it the second time, after he and Janice had left, and they did act cozy, as if the 4 of them made the innermost circle of the party, and the Angstroms and poor Buddy and that hungry Valerie were second echelon or third worlders somehow. Thelma got pretty drunk for her sallow skin gleaming to remind him of Vaseline, though when he thanked her for sending the clipping about the goose, she stared at him and then sideways at Ronnie and then back at him as if he had rocks in his head. "No point in keeping secrets. We'll all be dead soon enough. Already we're survivors. The kids are everywhere, making the music, giving the news." Ever since that encounter with Ruth, he's felt amputated, a whole world half seen in the corner of his eye snuffed out. Janice and the waxing machine are whining and knocking behind him, and the way his brain is going on reminds him of some article he read last year in the paper or Time, about some professor at Princeton's theory that, in ancient times, the gods spoke to people directly through the left, or was it the right half of their brains? They were like robots with radios in their heads telling them everything to do. And then somehow, around the time of the ancient Greeks or Assyrians, the system broke up. The battery's too weak to hear the orders, though there are glimmers still, and that is why we go to church. And what with all these jigaboos and fags roller skating around with transistorized earmuffs on their heads, we're getting back to it. How at night, just before drifting off, he hears Mom's voice, clear as a whisper, from the corner of the room, saying, "Hassie," a name as dead as the boy that was called that is dead. Maybe the dead are gods. There's certainly something kind about them, the way they give you room. What you lose as you age is witnesses, the ones that watched from early on and cared, like your own little grandstand. Mom, Pop, Old Man Springer, Baby Becky, good old Jill. Maybe that dream had to do with the time he took her in so suddenly, except her hair wasn't dark. It was so intense, the dream. There's nothing like a new relationship. Skeeter, Mr. Abendroth, Frank Beyer, Mamie Eisenhower just recently, John Wayne, LBJ, JFK, Skylab, the Goose, with Charlie's mother and Peggy Fosnot cooking. And his daughter, Annabelle Beyer, snuffed out with her whole world he was watching in the corner of his eye, like those entire planets obliterated in Star Wars. The more dead you know, it seems the more living there are you don't know. Ruth's tears when he was leaving. Maybe God is in the universe the way salt is in the ocean, giving it a taste. He could never understand why people can't drink salt water. It can't be any worse than mixing Coke and potato chips. Behind him he hears Janice knocking her waxer clumsily against the baseboards at every sweep, and it comes to him why they're being so busy. They're trying not to panic here in this house, where they shouldn't be at all, so far from Joseph Street. Lost in space. A huge hole to fill up. The money it'll take to fill these rooms with furniture when they had it all free before. He's ruined himself. And the mortgage payments, $62,400 at 13.5%, comes to nearly $8,500 interest alone. $700 a month over 20 years, nibbling away at the principal until he's 66. What did Ruth say about her youngest? 66. Funny about numbers. They don't lie, but do play tricks. 70, all the things he'll never get to do now. To have Cindy arrange herself in the pose of one of those penthouse sluts on a leopard skin, and get down in front of her on all fours and just eat and eat and eat. Last night Buddy turned to him so drunk his silver-rimmed eyeglasses were steamed, and said he knew it was crazy. He knew what people would say about her being too tall and having 3 children and all, but Valerie really did it for him. She is the one, Harry. With tears in his eyes he said that. The big news from over at the Flying Eagle was Doris Kaufman's planning to get married again. To a guy Rabbit used to know slightly, Don Eberhart, who had gotten rich buying up inner-city real estate when nobody wanted it before the gas crunch. Life is sweet, that's what they say. Light still lingers in the windows, along the white windowsills, at 5 when they finish, the days this time of year lengthening against the grain. The planets keep their courses no matter what we do. In the freshly waxed hall by the foot of the stairs, he touches Janice underneath her chin where the flesh is soft but not really repulsive, and suggests a little nap upstairs, but she gives him a warm kiss and competent, the competence cancelling out the warmth, and tells him, "Oh, Harry, that's a sweet idea, but I have no idea when they might be coming. It's all mixed up with a lie-down Mother was going to have. She really does seem frailer. And the baby's feeding time, and I haven't even shopped yet. Isn't the Super Bowl on?" "Not till 6. It's on the West Coast. There's a pre-game thing on at 4:30, but it's all hoopla. You can only take so much. I wanted to watch the Phoenix Open at 2:30, but you were so damn frantic to clean up just because your mother's coming over." "You should have said something. I could have done it myself." While she goes off in the Maverick, he goes upstairs, because there isn't any place downstairs to lie down. He hopes to see the squirrel again, but the animal is gone. He thought squirrels hibernated, but maybe the winter is too strange. He holds his hand over a radiator, his, and with pride and satisfaction feels it breathing heat. He lies down on their new bed with the Amish quilt they brought from Mount Judge, and almost without transition falls asleep. In his dream he and Charlie are in trouble at the agency. Some crucial papers with numbers on them are lost, and where the new cars should be in the showroom there are just ragged craters, carefully painted with stripes and stars in the concrete floor. He awakes, realizing he is running scared. There has been another explosion, muffled. Janice closing the door downstairs. It is after 6. I had to drive out almost to the ballpark before I found this Minute Mart that was open. They didn't have fresh anything, of course, but I got 4 frozen Chinese dinners that the pictures of on the box looked good. Isn't crap like that loaded with chemicals? You don't want to poison Prue's milk. And I bought you lots of bologna and eggs and cheese and crackers, so stop your complaining. The nap, that at first waking had felt as if somebody had slugged him in the face with a ball of wet clothes, begins to sink into his bones and cheer him up. Thelma and Nelson are out there circling, waiting to move in. Janice bought $30 worth at the Minute Mart, and as she fills the bright refrigerator he sees in a corner there are 2 more beers that escaped the vultures last night. She even brought him a jar of salted peanuts for all of $1.29 to watch the game with. The first half sways back and forth. He is rooting for the Steelers to lose. He hates what they did to the Eagles, and in any case doesn't like overdogs. He pulls for the Rams the way he does for the Afghan rebels against the Soviet military machine. At halftime, a lot of girls in colored dresses and guys that look like fags in striped jerseys dance while about 1,000 pieces of California brass imitate the old big bands with an off-key blare. Then some little piece of sunshine with an Andrews Sisters page boy sings Sentimental Journey, but it doesn't have that Doris Day wartime 40s soul. How could it? These kids were all born, can you believe it, around 1960 at the earliest, and worse yet, are sexually mature. On the "all aboard," they snake together in what is supposed to be the Chattanooga choo-choo, and then produce, out there in cloudless California, flashing sheets like tinfoil that are supposed to be solar panels. "Energy is people," they sing. "People are energy." Who needs Khomeini and his oil? Who needs Afghanistan? Fuck the Ruskies. Fuck the Japs, for that matter. We'll go it alone from sea to shining sea. Tired of sitting in his den alone with 100 million other boobs watching, Harry goes into the kitchen for that second beer. Janice sits at a card table her mother parted with as a loan grudgingly, even though she never plays cards except in the Poconos. "Where are our guests?" he asks. Janice is sitting there helping the Chinese dinners warm up in the oven and reading a copy of House Beautiful she must have bought at the Minute Mart. "They must have fallen asleep. They're up a good deal of the night. In a way it's a mercy we're not there any more." He trims his lips in upon a bitter taste in the beer. Grain gone bad. Men love their poison. "Well, I guess living in this house with just you is the way for me to lose weight. I never get fed." "You'll get fed," she says, turning a slick page. Jealous of the magazine, of the love for this house he feels growing in her, he complains, "It's like waiting for a shoe to drop." She darts a dark, not quite hostile look up at him. "I'd think you've had enough shoes drop lately to last 10 years. From her tone he supposes she means something about Thelma, but that had been far from his mind for now. Their guests don't arrive until early in the fourth quarter, just after Bradshaw, getting desperate, has thrown a bomb to Stallworth. Receiver and defender go up together, and the lucky stiff makes a circus catch. Rabbit still feels the Rams are going to win it. Janice calls that Ma and Prue are here. Ma Springer is all chattery in the front hall, taking off her mink, about the drive through Brewer, where hardly any cars were moving because, she supposes, of the game. Prue, pressing a pink-wrapped bundle tight to her chest out of the cold, looks worn and thin in the face, but more aligned, like a bed tugged smooth. "We would have been here earlier, but I was typing a letter to Nelson and wanted to finish," she apologizes. "It worries me," Ma is going on. "They used to say it brought bad luck to take a baby out visiting before it was baptized." "Oh, Mother," Janice says. She is eager to show her mother the cleaned-up house and leads her upstairs, even though the only lights are some 40-watt neo-colonial wall sconces, in which the previous owners had let many of the bulbs die. As Harry resettles himself in one of his silvery pink wing chairs in front of the game, he can hear the old lady clumping on her painful legs directly above his head, inspecting, searching out the room where she might someday have to come and stay. He assumes Prue is with them, but the footsteps mingling on the ceiling are not that many, and Teresa comes softly down the one step into his den and deposits into his lap what he has been waiting for. Oblong, cocooned little visitor, the baby shows her profile blindly in the shuddering flashes of color jerking from the Sony. The tiny stitchless seam of the closed eyelid aslant, lips bubbled forward beneath the whorled nose, as if in delicate disdain. She knows she's good. You can feel in the curve of the cranium she's feminine. That shows from the first day. Through all this she has pushed to be here, in his lap, his hands, a real presence hardly weighing anything but alive. Fortune's hostage, heart's desire, a granddaughter. His. Another nail in his coffin. His. This concludes the reading of Rabbit is Rich by John Updike.